Breaking news this hour. Australian police release the identity of a gunman holding up to 30 people hostage in a Sydney cafe. He's said to be an Iranian refugee. As oil prices plummet, the economic shockwave is sending energy companies across the world into bankruptcy, and not just in energy exporting nations. Palestine's chief negotiator tells RT he has high hopes for the territory's bid for statehood at the UN, amid concerns Washington could veto the attempt. Hello there, welcome to RT International. You're with me, Katie Pilbeam. We start with breaking news from Australia. The Sydney hostage taker has been identified as an Iranian refugee named Manhoran Monis. He's still holding up to 30 people in a cafe in the centre of the city. However, 5 people have left the building. The lights have now been turned off inside. Police say there is just one attacker and they're in contact with him. The area has been cordoned off and the surrounding buildings evacuated. Here is what some of the witnesses have been saying.
All up against the wall with their eyes closed and all their hands up against the glass.
The first pictures were the pictures of the windows, with the people, their hands against the windows. Straight away, there were 3 people that I knew. Seeing one of the girls there who's new, she's only been there about a week and a half.
The hostages were seen pressed up against the window, holding a black flag with Islamic messages. There are also some low-quality images of the attacker, who can be seen wearing a bandana with Arabic lettering on it. The siege is now in its 15th hour, but the information is still scarce. It's unclear how many people are inside, with estimates ranging from anything from 15 to 30. It's also not known whether the 5 hostages that left the building were freed or if they managed to escape. Plus, there are claims there might be more than one attacker. However, Australia's Prime Minister has praised the police response to the situation.
This is a very disturbing incident. It is profoundly shocking that innocent people should be held hostage by an armed person claiming political motivation. Nevertheless, I can say that New South Wales Police and other agencies have responded to this incident with great professionalism. You can be proud of the way your police and security bodies have responded to the events of this day.
Broadcaster and writer on international affairs Neil Clark believes Tony Abbott's praise comes a bit early.
Of course, there's still an awful long way to go, and I can think back. This reminds me of a siege we had in London, actually, back in the mid-70s, when IRA gunmen broke into a home and took a married couple hostage. I think that lasted almost a week, or if longer than a week, and that required lots of negotiations, and it was a very sort of scary process, really, as to what would actually happen. Unfortunately, nobody died in that siege, but I think Tony Abbott is a bit premature. Obviously, there's some kind of dialogue going on between the man in there and the authorities. I don't know how it's actually operating, but I think he is a bit premature.
The Australian military has been deeply involved in military campaigns in Muslim countries. It still has soldiers stationed in Afghanistan after Canberra sent a large contingent there back in 2001. Australia took an active part in the Iraq War, and its ground forces were among the first to enter the country. It's now actively supporting the US-led coalition's bombing campaign against Islamic State terrorists in Iraq. Neil Clark told us Australia could now be facing a backlash.
I think it's unjustifiable what has happened today. You can't say that you oppose Australian foreign policy and therefore it's justified to go into a crowded cafe in early morning, Monday morning in Sydney and take people hostage. You can't justify that. So there's no justification for what this man has done. Let's be clear about that. Having said that, However, of course, it's fairly clear that the Australian leadership throughout the last 10 or 15 years has made decisions in the foreign policy sphere, particularly in the Middle East, which have put Australians at risk and at danger. And you can argue that they didn't have to make these decisions. And this could be an example of blowback and an actual Australia being put in the firing line itself, Australian citizens.
As the hostage drama unfolds, some passers-by have used the opportunity to take selfies. Pictures have appeared on social networks with people taking photos of themselves with police or the cafe itself in the background of them. Now, the photos have caused a huge online backlash, with some calling them shameful and disgusting. One user even suggested exchanging these people with the hostages. Now, we've got some live pictures from the scene at Martin Place in central Sydney. There are up to 30 people being held in hostage in the Lindt Chocolate Cafe. Police have now given the media permission to release the attacker's identity. He is said to be an Iranian refugee named Haram Morris. The building has been cordoned off, and police say they are in contact with the lone gunman. Earlier, some of the captives escaped through the door, you can see in the video. Now, a total of 5 have left the building, although it's not clear whether the gunman let them go or if they did manage to flee themselves. Now, terrorism and the cash and ideology driving it are in the spotlight in today's Sophie & Co. Economist Loretta Napoloni told RT's Sophie Shevardnadze that no terrorist group can survive for long if it's not being funded by some governments.
Can terrorism really exist without state sponsorship?
Very difficult to exist without state sponsorship. Generally, what happens is that an armed organization is bankrolled by a state or, a very wealthy organization or individual. I mean, in the case of the Mujahideen, we know that the CIA was involved, but so was Saudi Arabia. So you can have, more than one sponsor also. And then once the group has established itself, if it's good enough, it can actually privatize the business of terrorism. So find a way to self-fund itself. This is exactly what's happened with the Islamic State, from 2011 to 2012, to 2013. It was bankrolled by various countries for example, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar. And then once it had established itself in the region, he wanted to control, he privatized the business of terrorism, so he started running strategic resources together with the local population, and he didn't need the money anymore. And this is when the terrorist organization can actually act independently and do whatever it wants.
Even if oil prices nosedive to as low as $40 per barrel, OPEC will not cut production to drive them up. That's the message from officials of the cartel. So to discuss this now, I'm joined by RT correspondents Polly Boyko in London and Murad Gazdiev here in the studio. So let's start with you, Murad. So I wonder, with this latest statement, what can we expect from the next OPEC meeting then? Presumably not a lot.
Well, they've said they're not going to hold an emergency meeting over this, and they're very much still chanting their latest mantra that we don't care, that oil can do whatever it wants. It can go down to as low as $40, which is a pretty big drop considering it's now at 60. And they're saying we still won't do anything. But I was actually at their last meeting in Vienna, where all these ministers came in, and I talked to them, and they said they were quite open about it, how unhappy they were at the falling oil prices. They were grumbling that something must be done. They went into the meeting for 2 hours. They come out with blank faces saying, we're not going to do anything, and we agreed to do so unanimously. So it's all very strange, and there's really no telling whether OPEC really means this, what they're going to do next. It's an international oil cartel. They have their own interests to look after, and actually trying to predict what they'll do is sometimes called OPECology, and it can be compared to, palm reading or astrology. So.
Well, we know that Russia is energy dependent, and we know that the markets here are having an effect, of course. What about the ruble? What about the markets here? What is the Moscow reaction to all of this? Well,
it's been negative, expectedly so. The ruble is hovering at record lows, 60 rubles to the dollar, unheard of before. But again, it's no surprise. The people here have resigned themselves to the fact that oil is tumbling and oil will continue to fall in value. So it's again nothing unexpected, and nobody's sitting around with their fingers crossed hoping that today will be the day that oil finally bounces back up. But again, oil is seen as an international benchmark, an economic benchmark. When oil rises, the global economy is doing well. People are buying more petrol, businesses are buying various fossil fuels. And whenever oil falls in value, the world economy isn't doing so well, as we're seeing now, really.
Indeed. Well, if we look internationally, if we look at what's happening on the markets at the moment, we know Asia markets are tanking because of this this oil price. We've got American stocks as well posting their biggest loss in what, 2 years or so. European markets around 3 years or so. So actually, while we talk about international affairs, let's get over to Polly in London. I want to know what the reaction is there, because, as I say, it's not really just the major oil producing countries, is it, Polly, that are having trouble with this oil price balancing the books. What's the London reaction and what's the consequences there?
Well, the cost of petrol here is almost down to £1 per litre. Filling up a car in Britain hasn't been this cheap since back in 2009. So motorists have been able to save a few pennies, but it's not all good news, because that plummeting oil price has knocked the oil and gas industry here sideways. Major oil companies such as Shell and BP are having to cut costs, they're having to cut jobs, and they're having to cut investment. And that's having a knock-on effect on all the oil and gas service companies within the UK. A new report out today, figures in it show that the number of UK oil companies that have declared insolvency over the past year has trebled compared to the year before. So we're seeing an increasing number of companies here that work in the oil industry that are unable to balance their books as a result of what's happening on the global oil market. And there's talk that these companies, after a few very lucrative years, were simply unprepared for this period of sustained deterioration of the oil price. So the bottom line is, with the price per barrel as it is right now, the prediction is that there's just not going to be enough work to go around for the entire oil industry here in Britain.
Right, Polly Boyko in London, thanks for giving us the update from Britain there. Thank you very much indeed. And Murad Gaziev joining me here in Moscow. Thank you. All right, moving on. German authorities are growing increasingly worried about the spread of far-right extremism. The spirit of Islamophobia is radicalising neo-Nazi groups, and the number of attacks on immigrants is rising. Plus, we look at why the EU is pumping €100 million into the construction of Polish airports, I should say, that won't have enough passengers to break even. Palestinian officials are stepping up their calls for statehood at the United Nations. In the coming days, they're expected to present a draft resolution demanding Israel withdraw from the occupied territories within 2 years. We spoke with the chief Palestinian negotiator in the peace talks, who thinks the move will gather broad support.
We're expecting the international community, permanent and non-member members of the Security Council, to pass this resolution, because passing these resolutions means safeguarding and preserving the two-state solution in view of the Israeli government's policies of undermining the two-state solution. In Israel, like any other nation on earth, if they feel they can do things and get away with it, they continue with the settlement activities, incursions, and dictations. If the international community decides to uphold Israel accountable, I'm sure Israel will change.
Despite the optimism, last month the previous draft of the resolution for the Security Council was vetoed by the US, which has been blocking Palestinian initiatives for years. But these are a growing number of European countries that are showing a willingness to recognise the state of Palestine. Earlier this year, Sweden became the first major EU country to do so. Similar votes have been taking place across Europe, but unlike Sweden, they are non-binding and hold no legal power. While European countries are willing enough to take this symbolic step, when it comes to real attempts to secure peace in the region, it seems they are more reluctant. Today's Going Underground discusses why the UK continues to sell arms to Israel, some of which were used in the summer offensive in Gaza.
We know that there are meant to be restrictions on any form of arms trade with Israel. We've already had that here in Britain, and the previous government said they cannot take any Israeli assurances anymore that the weaponry won't be used against Palestinian civilians. Despite that, there are still countless licenses being granted every year by the British government to allow this arms trade with Israel to continue. The Hermes 450 has been used in the military operations against Palestinian civilians and has been responsible for countless deaths. It's an open piece of information. So the British government knows that, and yet they're still ploughing ahead with this contract with a company which we believe should be completely beyond the pale. It's unacceptable.
Brand new terminals with no lines of stressed travellers, freshly painted runways waiting for no planes to arrive. That's the destiny of 3 airports in Poland, built in areas without enough passengers to keep them running. The EU provided €100 million for the construction. Financial expert Patrick Young says the union is just not spending wisely.
Well, I think the first problem here is the idea of EU and thinking. That's clearly an oxymoron. The difficulty you have with the European Union is that ultimately it has all of this money that it wants to divest in patronage through grants, through all sorts of different little sinecures throughout the land of the 28 nations, and it wants to try and make an economic impact. The problem is big, fat, blobby things like Brussels just don't work in a modern digital world. Within Brussels or Strasbourg, you believe money grows on trees. That's the fundamental problem and the fundamental backbone at which the European Union is pushing itself towards breaking point.
Poland is not the only country splashing the cash on white elephants in Europe. In Spain, the €150 million Castellón Costa Airport in Valencia, built in 2011, has never seen a single plane land. Another Spanish airport cost even more, at a massive €1 billion. It shared the same fate, and you can buy it at a bargain of €100 million. That's if you've got enough, you've got that cash lying around, that is. Now, Germany's famed efficiency has been called into question over an airport being built in the capital. Berliners have been waiting for their new hub to open since 2011. The ribbon cutting has been postponed multiple times. The shiny doors remain firmly closed, and the bill is rising fast. Some former US officials say they have no regrets over the CIA's brutal interrogation tactics, which were revealed in a Senate report. But the UK is trying to clean up its image after being caught in the allegations of prisoner torture as well. The details, they are coming up.
We are not talking the language of war, but I will only react to situations.
I have read the reports, but I'm not in a position to...
No, I will leave that to the State Department to comment on your latter point.
I don't want to say that.
Mr. Kerry, do you have any comments on the document? No. No comment? Thank you.
No more weasel words. When you evade a direct question, be prepared for a chase. When you throw a punch, be ready for a battle.
Freedom of speech means little without the freedom to question.
Do we speak your language? Want news, programs and documentaries in Arabic? It's all here on RT. Reporting from the world's hotspots, VIP interviews, intriguing stories. Are you here? Then try RT Arabic. To find out more, visit arabic.rt.com.
The International Space Station is currently the only manned structure outside planet Earth, but that could be about to change. Medina Kochanova has the story.
It is indeed official. Russia is planning to create its own independently operated space outpost. Confirmation came from Russia's space agency Roscosmos. So while the experts working on the details of the project, let's first talk about why this decision has been made. Well, Russia has been a successful part of the International Space Station for quite a while, a project that is run by a number of countries and their space agencies. However, recent geopolitical crisis has dramatically reduced the level Washington is willing to cooperate with Moscow. Even so, manned space exploration remains an area in which the U.S. is currently dependent on Russia to take crews to and from the ISS. And that so far has been unaffected by the standoff back on Earth. But there are reports Russia may not continue its participation in the ISS after 2020, when the current agreement ends. Well, let's now look at exactly what Russia brings to the ISS. Well, these segments of the station that provide work and rest areas for those on board are Russian-made. And if the current contract with the ISS is not prolonged, Russia may decide to use newly built segments for its own independent station. The plans are ambitious. It was reported that Russia might use the future station as a transfer point for planned expeditions to the moon, which is just one of the current projects the country is working on. And this space outpost could bring scientists just one step closer to the lunar surface and far beyond. Back to you, Katie.
German authorities are alarmed at a rising number of far-right extremists linked to a surge of attacks on foreigners. In the latest incident, 3 houses for asylum seekers were torched in the southern city of Vora. Radicals wrote Nazi swastikas and racist slogans on the walls. Luckily, nobody was injured. Germany's security services estimate there are around 22,000 far-right activists in the country. A quarter of them are dedicated to the neo-Nazi ideology and are extremely hostile to foreigners. And that hostility could easily turn into violence, as authorities say almost 10,000 of them are ready to become militants. Social affairs expert and counsellor Daniel Kohler says the figures are in line with the global trend of Islamophobia.
Germany has a long tradition of a rather large hardcore of militant neo-Nazis, and what we've seen in the last couple of years now is a state in a particular kind of Islamophobia that has been fueled in part by right-wing extremist and populist parties in Germany. So I think it's a combination of what is there in terms of a general sentiment against particular Muslim immigrants, and then what we've seen in the global political area with the war against Islamic State, the Syria conflict, the foreign fighter issue that basically feeds back into the fear and the feeling in a large part of the German population that Muslims are essentially a threat to the German society.
Internet pirates in Sweden are avenged by hackers. They were retaliating after the famous file-sharing website had its servers seized. Head to RT.com for more on who did it and the pirates' struggle for survival. Plus, in Kazakhstan's very own Sleepy Hollow, the people are suffering from an unknown disease. Scientists just can't explain why the population is falling asleep for a week at a time. The details are on RT.com. Now, almost a week since the controversial report into CIA torture was published in the US, reaction is continuing. And not all of it has been negative. For example, this is what former Vice President Dick Cheney had to say.
I have no problem as long as we achieve our objective. We got the authorization from the President and authorization from the Justice Department. I'd do it again in a minute.
But not everyone has been quite so accepting of the revelations. Britain, one of America's closest allies, has also been caught in the scandal. It's conducting a probe to determine whether its intelligence officials were involved in brutal interrogation techniques. In the meantime, Downing Street has set new rules for interrogating terror suspects. They go as far as banning intelligence officers from banging their fists on the tables or the walls and shouting. Already, some British officers say they can no longer properly interrogate suspects because of the new polite rules. Rodney Shakespeare, the chair of the Committee Against Torture, says the changes are just a way to divert attention away from the real problem.
We're getting at the moment the claim that we've got new rules, and this is because the British government is waking up to the fact that politically the whole thing is beginning to break open. The torture, the allegations, not allegations, the facts about torture are being known. And so our political establishment is now running for cover. And part of it, of course, is to claim, oh, in future, you won't even be allowed to bang on the table. But that is misleading from the issue. The ultimate issue is this is about torturing people because we are involved in a war on Islam.
The Ukraine crisis and Western sanctions have seen Russia's relations with the United States sink to a low point, not seen since the Cold War. RT spoke to the man who played a leading role in the breaking down of those divisions, Mikhail Gorbachev. He gave us his take on the current situation.
The US needs an enemy in order to return to their old policy of pressure. They can't live without it. They're still enslaved by their old policy. That's why America has to be stopped. But it should be stopped in a friendly manner. Let's be realistic. America is a phenomenon we can't ignore. Its word carries weight, and America can make decisions that benefit the whole world. Yes, Americans can lead, but they should do so in partnership with other nations, because the only kind of leadership that's possible today is leadership through partnership.
Mr. Gorbachev there. Now, you can watch the full interview with the former Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, here on RT on the 19th of December, and that's this Friday. And then a reminder of the hostage drama in Sydney, which is now in its 16th hour. These are the live pictures from the scene. In the latest development, the police have released the identity of the attacker. He's said to be Manhoron Monis, a radical Muslim cleric who came to Australia from Iran in 1996. He was earlier involved in a hate mail campaign to protest Australian troops' presence in Afghanistan. Up to 30 people still remain inside the cafe in central Sydney. 5 have left the building, although it's unclear whether they escaped or whether they were let go by the attacker. Coming up on RT International, then, Crosstalk discusses the reason behind deteriorating relations between Russia and the US. If you're watching us in the UK, hello to you. And it's a look into the lives of the albinos of the African state of Tanzania.